Our lives are laid out on a road of bumps, turns, struggles, and more. How do we respond? How do we endure adversity for learning and growth? I'm Aubrey Johnson, and we'll explore these questions and more on the Road to Rediscovery. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Road to Rediscovery. I'm your host, Aubrey Johnson. The Road to Rediscovery is about reflecting on life lessons to learn and grow from them, and of course, pay it forward and help others who are struggling through dark times. Now, as you know, on the Road to Rediscovery, we are passionate about bringing you quality content that is of value to you and your personal growth. If you like what you hear, please visit roadtorediscovery.com/donate. That's road, the number 2, rediscovery.com/donate. We'll give you a shout out in a future episode. And as always, there is no obligation. We are truly grateful for your listenership. My special guest is an author of 22 books across 4 genres with a focus on the power of personal responsibility, self-discovery, and the chain reaction between choices and consequences. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Branch Isole to the show. Hey, Branch, how are you doing? It's great to have you here, sir.
Thank you, Aubrey. It's great to be with you.
Oh, fantastic. Wonderful. Well, I'm ready to crack into this awesome conversation. Your writings seem to go on a journey in different areas, but they're all connected to the one holistic person. You talk spiritual, you talk intimacy, you talk, emotional, and of course, self-development. So I want to know, behind your writings, what was the inspiration behind your writings, particularly of self-development themes?
That's a great question because, I never saw myself as a writer. In fact, I had an entirely different life and career before I started writing. And on that journey, I was in a typical get a job, get an education, get a job, become the best you can in the job, succeed. And on that part of the journey, I was very successful, but there was always something missing.
Yeah.
And so when I left the corporate world and started on different paths of trying to discover more about who am I, why am I here, and what do I have to offer, or do I have anything to offer? And because I had been a teacher originally, there was that always trying to share information and examples that would help other people in their lives, just the natural service heart of a teacher.
Right.
But on the journey, in the self-discovery phase, I hit some tough roadblocks and had some real down types of experiences. And I grew from those, but it took time. It wasn't an overnight sort of epiphany. And in those years, I had the opportunity to go back to school, and I had a desire to write a book. And I had decided that, I've run into so many people in my lives who had fallen away from spirituality, or fallen away from the church, or fallen away from what they thought they were looking for, and got caught up in the world and, went in that direction. So I decided I needed to write my book. And at the same time, I went back to get another degree in theology, just because I wanted to know more. And so that's how the writing came about. I was compelled to write my first book for fallen away Christians and those seeking and searching, for a spiritual path, because that book is a comparative study of the world's religions. So it offers the reader an opportunity to compare, what the world's religions offer. And then from that point, I figure, okay, now they have a little base of comparison. They'll know a little more, and they can discover or choose what path is right for them. So that was sort of the foundation. I only thought that I would write one book. But as it turned out, I just kept going. And so 22 books later, I'm still an author, and that was the process. But I never thought of myself as a writer. So it was a real career change for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I really appreciate you sharing, and giving us the context of that foundation, right, and what set you on that path. When you originally thought that you would write one book and just one book, um, at what part of that process? Because I've never written a book, but I heard that it's a very arduous process. There's a lot involved in, and I'm trying to figure out, like, at what point in that process um, do you feel compelled to keep going, as you say? I mean, was it admiring and appreciating the finished product, or was it somewhere in the middle of the process?
What a great question. Because, that process was for a specific reason, a specific
Hmm.
subject matter. And
Hmm.
so, in that dedication to the subject matter,
Hmm.
obviously, I tried to write the best book I can or I
Hmm.
could that the reader would enjoy and still fulfill that need for me to share.
Hmm. Hmm.
When I got done with first book was a nonfiction book, right? So it was
Hmm.
sort of academic and sort of um, life changing types of subject. After
Gotcha.
that, I happened to be sitting out. I was living in Hawaii at the time and was sitting out on the edge of the ocean. And I was thinking, what would go through a person's mind if they were lost at sea? If they were
Right.
floating in the middle of the
Hmm.
ocean and probably had no chance of being rescued, what kinds of things would they think about and what kinds of fears would they have to face in that
Right. Right.
loneliness and then abandonment? And
Yeah.
out of that thought came my first poetic short story. And
Hmm.
from that point on, and for several years thereafter, that's what came tumbling out. And so the second book was a collection of sort of the stories that you referred to in the introduction. And it just
Mm.
kept going. And so
Mhm.
the deeper I got into exploring, emotions and physical and mental responses and
Yeah.
the kinds of things that people, go through
Mhm.
in the decision process and in the action process. So it just sort of built upon itself.
I see. I see. Oh man, that's great. That is great. So, Branch, I want to kind of pivot and kind of go in the direction of choices and consequences, from a development standpoint, a personal development standpoint. Um, Particularly, if you can share for the listener's benefit, the relationship, if any, that self-awareness has on choices and consequences. Here on the show, we have what we call the four cornerstones to personal growth, and that's self-awareness, humility, gratitude, and service to others. And so, I would love to hear your take on the impact, and the part that self-awareness plays on making choices and consequences.
Well, it's the core, right? I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
we are who we are, and we are who we believe we are,
Hmm.
and we also are who we think we are portraying to the world.
Mm.
And that person can be, three different people.
Right.
We all carry with us through life, the baggage and the experiences that we've had since childhood. I mean, we are each
Hmm.
a culmination of everything that we've experienced and what we've come from and who we are. So
Hmm.
I love your four cornerstones because I talk about this, in some of my writing, and the cornerstones are great as long as they're all there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
this connection between who we are and what we believe to be true,
Mm-hmm.
is the fundamental structure of the decisions that we make, the choices that we make.
Right.
And every day we're faced with different situations, different events, different people in our lives that require us to respond.
Mm-hmm.
And the key is how do we respond? What response
Right.
is going to fulfill that need in the immediate moment, but is also going to propel us forward, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
on this journey that we're experiencing. Uh, the key becomes what the consequence of that choice is. And so all of our choices and all of our decisions have a consequence at the end. And, successful people, whatever that might look like in life or in relationships, but people who are growing and moving forward
Right.
normally have a vision of the consequence from their decision they're about to make. Now,
Yes.
the easiest way to figure that out is, well, have I been in this situation before, and what was the consequence of the choice at that time?
Right. Right.
A lot of people, however, you know, refuse to, for whatever reason, reflect on that past experience. And
Right.
they just sort of go with their gut, or go with, this is what I want right now,
Yeah.
without thinking about what that consequence may be. And,
Mm-hmm.
we believe, we grow up with this idea that we are in control of our lives. And the fact is, in most cases, we aren't.
Right.
The only thing that we have control of is our response. So that's why it's so important that we understand this connection between, choice and consequence, choice and response, because the responses that we make can be good, bad, or ugly. And, a lot of people are making real poor choices in their lives and
Mm-hmm.
suffering horrendous consequences, especially in this day and age that we live in. So, these
Yeah.
are all connecting the dots of how do I have a better life? How do I become a better person?
Right.
How do I reduce the stress and the struggle and the conflict that I'm experiencing in daily life?
Right.
Um,
Right. Uh,
and I find there's four cornerstones of relationships.
mm-hmm.
Life is about relationships, uh, at home, at work, with friends. Our entire day is spent in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
relationships are about successful communication that will produce growth filled balance. And, without that balance, we struggle. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Balance produces the stability of the four cornerstones, in our relationships and in our lives, like you had addressed earlier. The
Mm.
better balance we experience, the better prepared we are for challenges and adversities in life.
Yes. So true. So true. I couldn't agree more, Branch. And thank you for sharing your take on that for sure. Um, and that leads me to ask, because there's an operative word that you mentioned at the beginning of your response to this, and that word is core. And I wanted I couldn't agree more when you say core. In fact, um, in my on my digital course, when we cover the four cornerstones, the very first one we cover is self awareness, because uh, I believe self awareness must be a prerequisite. You must have or be self aware uh, in order to
Sure.
achieve humility, gratitude, service to others, and so forth. So, my question to you, sir, um, is is self awareness um, a core prerequisite to reflection or being
Oh,
reflective?
sure.
Mhm.
I, I, You're so right on. We get up every morning, right? And we look in the mirror,
Mm-hmm.
and who is it that we see?
Yeah.
And who is it that we prepare to go out and face the challenges of the world? And
Mm-hmm.
that image that we see, I had listened to one of your other podcasts about from the lady who did the one on self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And, our self-awareness can be positive or it can be negative.
Sure
And
can.
wherever we build from that core, that dictates who we are through our entire day.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, the world we live in has lots of challenges. And by the end of the day, we can be beat down pretty well. It's a struggle to stay ahead of the game or to even be participating. And so
Yes.
our self awareness, is the core to who am I and who am I that's going out there to face the challenges, in my life.
Right.
I
Right.
couldn't agree more. And that self-image, that reflection of who we see in the mirror is who we then go out and present to the world. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it is my self-image and my self appearance who I truly am, or is it a facade a mask that I put
Right.
on when I leave the house and
Right.
then take
Right.
it off when I get home. So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's that at that core of who we are is who we are. What is my self awareness of who I truly am, and
Yeah.
that's a struggle in our world.
No, you're right. I mean, it's so foundational. And um, I wanted to ask you um, about, you know, seeing yourself. If we had the ability or the superpower of, um, we're in our bodies, and so everything we see is first person perspective, right? And wherever we go, whoever we talk to, whatever machinery we operate, and those sorts of things. But um, if we had the ability to not clone, but kind of view ourselves from outside of our bodies and look at ourselves from like a second person point of view. Um, if we all had that ability, what do you think most of us would find? That we're the same as how we perceive ourselves, or that we're the idea we have of ourselves and how we interact with the world and perceive, with the world is way different, or does it depend from person to person?
Yeah, such a hard question to answer. I think it depends from
Yeah.
person to person, like you say.
Yeah.
We all want to be part of something. That's
Yes.
just our human nature, is to be a collection of like-mindedness, so that we as a group and we as individuals in the group continue to move forward.
Hmm.
Um, as you were asking, I was thinking, one of the things that I find so difficult and yet so disturbing, and it plays into that second person scenario you mentioned.
Hmm.
So many people, in their life, in their daily life, experience something that really takes its toll on them.
Yes.
And for those who don't have that, that resilience of self-awareness and self-reflection
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
pick myself up,
Hmm.
it's easy to beat ourselves up,
Yes.
rejection, failure, all of
Yes.
those. I didn't get as much as I wanted or where I wanted. Those feelings of failure can be so overwhelming that we go back and reflect on what we said, what we did, and the outcome. And yet, instead of looking, okay, what can I take from this as a positive for my own
Right.
growth in a
Right.
similar situation next time,
Hmm.
instead we tend to beat ourselves up about
Yep.
what we did wrong or what, oh, I was such a stupid fool, what I said.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And that only takes us deeper into this self-doubt and this, self-reflection. Well, I'm really not worth it. And then you get into that whole worthiness thing. And
Yes.
that beating ourselves up, is self-defeating. And when we have a choice, when we fail, in every failure, we did something correct. We did
Right.
something that was positive and can be built upon. So that self-reflection is so important instead of this, well, I failed, so now I'm going
Yeah.
to beat myself up about it. And what happens
Yeah.
in so many cases with people is when they're in that place of beating themselves up, their next step is to escape from that damage, that self-damage. And,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
where we have situations of drugs, alcohol,
Yeah.
abuse, inappropriate behavior,
Yeah.
trying to escape from that beating that we're giving ourselves. So, that
Yeah.
holds us deeper and deeper and deeper until at some point, we're truly broken people. And,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
we've got to build from the core up and see the positive. Every situation has an upside and a downside. That coin has
Of
two
course.
sides.
That's right.
And
That's right.
when the negative is there, we've also got to look for the positive. The universe is always in balance. There's
Hmm.
always a positive and negative flow. So
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
have to realize and understand that too. In my life, there's positive and negative. I have to recognize the negative for what it is, but
Right.
I've got to search out the positive, you know, and embrace that and build upon that. The more I can build upon the positive, the less the negative has an influence on me.
Makes all kinds of sense. And Branch, I am so very glad that you shared this insight, right? Because a lot of the listeners on the show, they are faced with some seemingly insurmountable challenges, some huge barriers and struggles, and this, I think, helps equip them for taking the necessary approach towards transformation, towards a different perspective, right, in how they view the negative things happening to them, and understanding, to your point, that there's positive in everything, including all the failures. There's positive, and each failure gets you closer to that success, whatever that success looks like, as you said earlier. Yeah, so I really appreciate that insight. Now, in kind of building on that, Branch, we talked about self development. I'm sorry, we talked about self awareness, and we talked about the relationship, or how it's foundational to reflection. So to be self aware is very good. To reflect is very good. But to me, now, to take it to the next level, I think if we can briefly talk about ownership, accountability, responsibility. Okay. And when you reflect and you recognize the good and the bad choices, it's easy to accept the good choices. Yeah, I made that decision and it worked out, pat on the back. But the bad choices, and let me just preface by saying this. I understand, and I know you have more insight on this, but I understand that there are expected consequences because of the conscious actions that you're doing, to drive to that consequence, and unexpected consequences, whether you were intending to drive towards it, or a different consequence, or you weren't even paying attention to the consequences because you want it now, whatever it may be. So, I want to ask, uh, what is how does one get to that next level for taking ownership, for after reflecting and acknowledge the bad? You briefly touched on it as you were chatting, earlier, as you were giving your response. I was wondering if we can unpack that a little bit.
Great question. And you said it in your question. It's about taking responsibility.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When we succeed, we love to take responsibility, and
Yeah.
nothing succeeds like success.
Right.
This is why when we see successful people, everything they do seems to be a success and
Yes.
work out. Well,
Yes.
believe it or not, they've got issues too, and they've got problems they face, but
Mm-hmm.
they handle those problems in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So the again, we live in a world where the impetus to
Mm-hmm.
take responsibility for our choices and our actions
Mm-hmm.
almost is non-existent, and we see it in every aspect of our life today.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have leaders in every industry and in every government and
Mm-hmm.
in every movement
Mm-hmm.
who don't take responsibility, and we're in a really tough world. Uh, Up until the Industrial Revolution, your daily existence and survival was your responsibility. You
Yes.
had to be self-responsible for getting to the end of the day and still being alive.
Yes.
And as mankind has changed and adapted, and as we've become, more industrial and technologically advanced, it's allowed us to take some escape routes and
Mm-hmm.
to feel okay about placing blame or
Mm.
making excuses, for things that we at one point in our lives might have been ashamed of or embarrassed by,
Right.
by a
Right.
choice or an action. And so I think the key, there's two things I find in what you've said. First of all, in reference to what we talked about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
most people, are in a base level of insecurity. Uh, I'm too short, I'm too fat, I'm too bald, I'm too
Right.
this, I'm too that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what's holding me back, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
sort of my excuse for my failures and
Right.
for not being who I want to be or who I see myself as being.
Mm-hmm.
Well, once we get out of that base level of insecurity, and how do we do that? We actually take a good hard look at ourselves and accept who we are
Yes.
and look and find our positive strengths and build upon those. I'm
Yes.
going to be as bald as I am. If I'm never going to have hair again, I might as well accept it. So once we can leap out of that stranglehold that our insecurities have on us,
Mm-hmm.
we're free then to grow. Well, the first thing that happens when we have that freedom to grow is we're
Mm-hmm.
hit with all of these other things in our lives, like you just mentioned: responsibility,
Right.
reliability, dependability,
Right.
accountability, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are the lessons of life that we all experience. And the key one, after becoming free and understanding, okay, I can be more of who I want to be, is I
Mm-hmm.
have to be responsible for my decisions. I have to take responsibility
Right.
for the positive and the good that I accomplish, but I also have to take responsibility, you know, when I fail, when I stumble, and when I fall. And if
Right.
you'll take the self responsibility aspect and understand, okay, I failed for this reason. In order to not fail again, I change my action. So I look again
Yes.
for the strength. Okay. What didn't work now allows me to know what may work in the future.
Mm.
So
Okay.
it's a matter of this being self, being responsible for my decisions and my actions.
Gotcha.
If I fail, it doesn't help me to blame somebody else or make an
No.
excuse or say, well, the dog ate my homework. When
Right.
I admit that, I failed because whatever the reason may be, then I'm on the path to growth, to not
Yes.
failing again for that
Yes.
reason. And the more we do that, again, the more we take responsibility and choose better and make better decisions and choices,
Hmm.
then that success starts to build. And again, we build upon the success, and we know, okay, this doesn't work, so I'm not going down that path.
Right. Right.
So that
Gotcha.
responsibility for choice, but responsibility for actions as well.
100%. I love it. I love it. And I'm in total agreement, by the way. So, thank you
Yeah, well,
for sharing that insight for sure. Because uh, I hate to say it or admit it, but I mean, there's people out there um, who I don't want to say close minded, but I mean, uh, but needs to open their mind a little bit more to take that hard look in the mirror at themselves, and to understand that it's okay to, look at the bad things and recognize them as bad things, bad choices. But two things: number one, look at it as a growth opportunity because it puts you on the path to growth, as you said; and number two, that you're not going to beat yourself up over it because we're all human. We're all broken. We all make mistakes.
yeah.
So, and so what you shared, Branch, is I think pivotal in a lot of the listeners' transformation, for those who find themselves in that proverbial rut. So thank you for sharing that, sir. Um, I I I read an article on your website, about attaining life balance, and there was a part that kind of resonated with me. And if I can just read that blurb, and if you can share with the listeners
Sure.
some context behind that, if you don't mind. All right.
Not at all. Go ahead.
Um, oh, thank you. Um, here's It's an excerpt from that article. It's where it says, when our spirit isn't active, it comes to recognize right versus wrong as a community or society standard. Because the spirit is inactive, it doesn't identify ethics or morals as the roots or the whys of right and wrong. Can you share, for the listeners, and break that down, and how it relates to people making the right and wrong choices in society?
Sure. Thanks for asking. Thanks for the quote from the article. You know, we are all creations of God, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And because God is spirit, we are also spirit.
Yes.
When we are born, our four cornerstones of our being are mind, body, soul, and spirit. And that's the foundation of who we are as human beings. So because we're spirit, that spirit has come from God. Now, God's character and nature is morality and ethics.
Hmm.
And because we are now, humans with a spirit, we innately understand right and wrong. And of
Yes.
course, that's what our legal systems and our standards and our codes and codices are all built upon, the
Hmm.
concept of right and wrong.
Hmm.
But the action part of right and wrong is what we come to know as reward and punishment. And we learn that, as toddlers, very quickly on in
Yeah.
our lives, we
Right.
recognize what right and wrong mean, and it
That's
normally
right.
means reward and punishment. So that's the concept that we grow up with,
Hmm.
and that's what our legal system reinforces is reward and punishment. Now,
Yes.
in our spirit, because we are from God, we, you know, can know right from wrong very quickly and very easily. But because we are not spiritually grounded, that is, because we have not reconnected with God,
Hmm.
we only know right and wrong as reward and punishment. And
Mm.
we don't recognize the moral or ethical implications behind right and wrong. The moral and the ethical are the why, the right and wrong is the how. So once we're in that place, and we go through our life with this reward and punishment type of mentality, what we do or why we get punished for it is more important than why we are avoiding the punishment. And we can only do that
Oh,
when we understand the morality and the ethics.
yes.
When we understand the morality and the ethics, then it's not about reward and punishment anymore. It's about, it's like going from life 101 to life 101A.
Yes.
You automatically, you now see the truth, right?
Yes.
And once you see truth in everything. It's just like we just talked about responsibility, credibility, accountability, right?
Right.
When you see the truth, you understand the moral and the ethical implications of any action in any of those lessons or responsibilities. When you embrace the moral and the ethical, it's no longer about, well, if I do this, will I get a reward or will I get punished? It's
right.
If I do this, am I harming someone else because of my immoral or unethical choice or actions?
Right. Or what does it say about me as a person? Right.
Oh, exactly. That's when we really have to be self-reflective. If I claim to be an upright pillar of the society or of the system or of the community, and I go out and commit a crime, against others or the state or property or whatever, who am I really?
Right.
Is it about me getting caught and being punished, or is it about me being, the moral and ethical person that I am trying to purport and show the world? And therein lies, the conflict that destroys so many individuals, is because they claim to be who they want to be, but the reality is they're not there yet. And the reason they're not there is they're operating on right and wrong, reward and punishment level, and they're not dealing with the moral and the ethical implications that affect not only them, but their families, their extended families, their co-workers, their boss, their company, their community, their nation, their world. And the only way we can get that spiritual spark to enlighten us from reward and punishment to truth, moral, and ethics is to have that reconnection with God. And for the Christian, that's through, Jesus Christ and our acknowledgement of Christ. For when we acknowledge Jesus and invite him into our lives, his blessing is he sends his spirit, the spirit of God, the creator, to be with our spirit. All of a sudden, when we have the Holy Spirit living within us with our spirit, everything we see becomes self-evident as to whether it's truth or falsehood.
Wow.
And once you know the truth, it becomes, self-fulfilling that you become a more moral and ethical person. Because if you know the truth and you refuse to go there, then you've trapped yourself, in that other place where you are not who you claim to be. And that's where the struggle becomes. I purport to be this person, but in reality, I'm not that person.
I see.
Nobody really cares about me that way, but I do. And I have to live with that every day. And this is why we have, so many people with mental illness problems, because of that internal struggle of who I think I am, who I say I am, but really that's not who I am.
Understood. Man, Branch, that was an absolutely tremendous breakdown and clarity in how you delineated when we make choices. Are they based on punishment and reward, or is it moral and ethics, and the difference between the two? and not having that connection, or that with the spiritual side, can lead you more on the punishment reward trail, if you will, um, versus when you connect with God and
Well,
start to live a different meaning of life when you're making decisions based on morality or moral and ethics. So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that and breaking that down for the listeners in a big way and in a very clear way, Branch. I really appreciate it. So, Branch, how can the listeners connect with you and check out your readings, your articles, your books, and just learn more about the great work that you're doing?
Aubrey, thanks for asking. It's for me, it's so easy. All you have to do is Google my name. There's you when you do that, you won't get pages and pages. There's only me, so it goes right to my page, and
Uh-huh.
all of my links and connections, and everything I've written, and my podcasts, and all the
Hmm.
articles, my website, my YouTube
Hmm.
channel. It's all right there. So it's real easy. Just Google Branch like a tree,
Yep.
and my last name is Isole, Isole.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I know your web address for your website. Pardon me. And I am going to put your direct links on the episode show notes so the listeners can click the links to learn more about you as they are listening to this great conversation. Branch, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, sir, and just sharing some insights and unpacking a bunch of good, deep, value, helpful knowledge for the listeners who are, goal oriented and looking for personal growth. I want to thank you again for coming on the show, Branch.
Aubrey, my pleasure, buddy. I really appreciate your time and having me on.
Oh, thank you. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening. And look, if you have a loved one, a colleague, coworker, a friend who seems to be just down in despair, not quite themselves, going through enormous struggles and challenges, um, I humbly ask that you please share this show with them. They may feel as if they have nowhere to turn, but on the road to rediscovery, we want our listeners to know two things. Number one, you're not alone. And number two, there is always hope. The road to rediscovery, it's a movement, a revolution. And guess what? You are now part of it. We're all roadies on this journey of life, and it sure feels good having you on the road with me. Thanks again for listening. We'll chat again soon. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of The Road to Rediscovery. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at roadtorediscoverypodcast@gmail.com and leave us any questions or comments you may have. The Road to Rediscovery is an AJ Shark production.